Good afternoon. It's Sunday afternoon. It's about 20 to 4. And we're ready to rock and roll as we keep moving through the course. This is probably the first video I'll post. I won't have time to post the second one today, but I will post one in a day or two in case I feel like I haven't gotten the content done that I want to get done, the content piece. But I just want to get you set up for the week in terms of all the expectations and so forth. I also know I have not responded to what you posted this past week, and I'll have those out to you tomorrow. I am feeling better. The tests haven't all come back yet, so we'll see where that's going to take me. But I am feeling better, but I'm still backed up with large parts of the life. So bear with me, and thank you for your kind words. I do appreciate that. And the saying I usually have is "Don't get old," but first of all, who has control over that? And secondly, the opposite of not getting old means that you never got to being old. So I don't know what to say about that as such. Bear with me, and we'll make it work as such. I'm going to share the screen. You have not, at this moment, I don't have this video up yet. The video will be part of the agenda, which is revised as we speak. And you'll see that in a minute. And I just want to make sure you're okay with all the. And by the way, if you have any questions, I don't get a lot of questions from you, but if you have any kind of questions, please let me know. One young lady, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Sort of my conscience, my Jiminy Cricket, if you know who Jiminy Cricket was, as the conscience in many Disney analogies that speaks to, did you forget to do something or did you do something wrong? And I apologize. Last name begins with a D. Pamela, but whoever you are, I'm sorry. She pointed out last week that I kept referring to Tomlinson. I don't know why I did that. The name isn't Tomlinson. You know, as far as the readings are concerned, the name was Hammond. Linda Darling Hammond. I just don't know why I kept blanking on that. And the answer to that is don't get old. But whenever you hear the word Tomlinson or see that word Tomlinson in any of the agendas, it's really Hammond. I guess it's helpful that we've kind of finished that book and the course as such, although I certainly thread this way all the way through to the end. But I just wanted to correct that because the lady was kind enough to point it out to me. Otherwise, I would have continued to sin forever. So let us share the screen. And here we go. And again, I think I said this last week, but it doesn't hurt to keep saying it. This is something I want to bring up too. I'm going to keep that share going, but I want to bring something else up. You know what? I'll stop the video for a minute. No, that's a pain in the neck. Give me a minute. Go ahead, get a drink of water or something if you want to wait. I'll be back in about 30 seconds or less. Okay, I have that up. I'm ready to roll now. I guess it was about 30 seconds. Okay, as I have said, first of all, there's a mistake here. It's week 9. There will be, as I said, probably 2 videos, but this will be the first one, just to get your motor running for the week. And it is, here we go. So what I've posted before is that these same links, the needs assessment video, the 5Y video, the fishtail, and the SWOT charts are all a bundle of one premise, which really we're going to address much more specifically today. And if nothing else, you should watch all the videos. Some of them are very brief. And there's one that's just a bit longer, and that's the first one. That is to say, the needs assessment video itself. And I'm not going to take your time up while it's there for you to take a look at. But you should take a look at it because you're going to need it for this week's part of the discussion question. And you're going to need it in terms of pasting all the pieces together. Watch my little fingers link up when you bring the whole piece of the action design that you're doing for the last assignment in the course as you move through it. So there they are, and we're going to look for those. There's also another PowerPoint I'm going to bring up in this class in a few minutes. You may have seen it before. I don't forget if I showed it to you. That will also drive the point home about needs assessment. Now, the week's goals are, in terms of the assignments, are right here. There's a journal question that's down here. I'll color it green for St. Patrick's Day. And what you need to do is the same thing you did last. Oh, I said before I'm going to respond to your postings from this past week, yesterday. This is the same premise. I can't get the assignments to open up, rather the websites to open up off the list that I have. So what you'll need to do is to look for this particular assignment. All right, and then what you need to do from that is discuss how or whether you would incorporate its themes into your action design. More specifically, the article is about involvement, about engagement, about showing how to get a community involved. And a few things are more important in terms of research about that lately, and that's certainly something that you will appreciate having, as well as the fact that I thought that the Hammond book made a good case for it. All three of the books, Hammond, Koza, and Fullen, all speak about something called engagement or involvement. I prefer to use the word engagement, though I will sometimes synonymously use its sister, which would be involvement. But it's engagement, in my mind, is a deeper, more psychically committed to contributing to the whole of what it is that the community and the school would want to see happen for the children, or in any kind of activity that you're talking about. In my mind, engagement's a heck of a lot more solid than going steady. Use an old 1960s phrase versus getting engaged. Two different things. They cross over with each other, but they're not the same thing as such. Okay, so that's the journal question. And then there's a discussion question as well. In my view, they're both equally important. In my view, and I'll read to you here. This discussion will be devoted to preparing for the last assignment. As stated last week, each of the next weeks will chunk the parts of the action plan into more depth so that you can integrate all the pieces along the way. And this week's discussion question is about both needs assessment and goal formation. And we'll talk more about that in a moment to give you some more directions as far as that's concerned. So the discussion task this time, remember last week you did sort of a frame the issue kind of premise, really what you think that you know, not necessarily what you know that you know, not necessarily what you don't know that you don't know. In order to really squeeze those together so that you do know more than you all of what you need to know, or as much as you possibly can, you've got to do a needs assessment. When you do a needs assessment properly, then you are able to form a goal. So there's two pieces to this chunk. One is you are telling me which of the different strategies I'm about to speak to you might use in a true needs assessment about the issue that you spoke about. I think last week we used the example of the young lady who spoke about discipline in her school. All right, so we know she's framed an issue about discipline, but has she figured out what people are really thinking about needs assessment about discipline? Have you figured out? Have you begun to pull the data together to decide what it is you really need to know about discipline, but not undisciplinary issues? Now, I'm not asking you to do a real needs assessment. I'm not asking you to do a real needs assessment. I'm not asking you to do a real needs assessment. I'm asking you to tell me how you conduct one. Okay. So that's what I'm interested here in. And the other piece of that is once you have, in theory, with a small t, once you have pulled together what your needs assessment strategies would look like, multiple strategies, not just one, then tell me what you think your goal is. And so, I'll model that for you in a minute. We'll use the behavior issue more specifically. Now, when you've got this up as posted for your colleagues to respond to, and my responses to both of those pieces, now you'll have 2 of the 5 pieces that you need for the action plan design that you're going to do. You'll have a general idea about what the issue is. Then you're going to have the strategies that you would use to come up with getting more information about that issue, and then what you think your goal is. And so that's sort of, to use an old phrase, as the twig is bent, so grows the tree. The rest of the plan cannot grow without bending the twig in the right direction. Another way to look at it would be to think of it as a triangle. It's the base of the triangle, those 2 pieces. The issue, okay, and then the needs assessment and goal. So there's really 3 steps within that triangle there to work from. So therefore, what you need to do is post for interaction among your colleagues which strategies you'll use to gather information. And then I have a slide presentation I'm going to do in this video to help you do that. And again, you don't have to actually do a needs assessment. You just have to say what you would do if you were doing a needs assessment. Then you offer me a goal, or for us a goal, for us to respond to. And we'll come to that in just a little bit. Okay. So I'm going to skip over some of these things. Let me show you how it looks in the plan again. We'll do it backwards and forwards here. So now we're getting into this corner here. You're going to give us a goal. And how are you going to do that needs assessment? In other words, what strategies, what might you use to do the needs assessment? So that's how this begins to shape itself out as you start to move across this template as such. I'll also point out to you, I'm not sure if I've pointed it very strenuously, there's a list of the same premises I've been talking about. You begin with an issue, then you generate a SMART goal analysis, and that's going to take place as a needs assessment. Okay? Those are some of the things that you can use, although we haven't spoken about them specifically in this class yet in terms of developing good change strategies. And as you get down to about number 8, you're really, believe it or not, going to roll all the way through over to A somewhere where you're going to come up with the goal. And don't go any further than that. Don't worry about 9, 10, 11, 12. Just take a look at those first several listings there. Now, let's talk needs assessment. Stop this share and bring up a PowerPoint. It's not a great PowerPoint. I've done better ones. And I will not lie to you. I took this from I'm thinking something out loud. I took this from something I used in another course, actually. Actually, it was a business course that I was teaching about change. And I thought it's basically pretty helpful. Now I'm wondering whether I did some of this last week because my mind is such jelly. It's such a piece of jelly lately. But it doesn't hurt to hear it again because now that's the task that we're working on in any event. So I'll satisfy myself on that count. So I'm pretty sure I did. So it's called taking pulses, finding out what's really going on. What is it that you need to know? What's happening out there? Why do people do what they do? I have another class that's working on a similar plan, a little more complicated than you're doing, about teacher climate, teacher culture, where they're dissatisfied with how the teachers feel about being teachers, about their faculty, about how well their school is going. They're pretty upset about it, and everyone's running around saying we're upset, but no one's trying to figure out what's going on, why they think that they think that they're upset. and trying to understand the underlying pieces. What lies beneath, to use one of my favorite phrases. And to do that, you need to do a needs assessment. I'll give you another example for those of you who prefer to do your plan, not on discipline, but let's say on the gap between ENL children's performance on various academic expectations and the so-called general education population. A needs assessment obviously is necessary. You know, how are the ENL children performing? How are the gen kids performing? What's the differences? Why are some of these? What do people think about these differences? What are some of the root causes to go with it? There's a lot to get going on that before you can go forward to actually put a plan in place with a set of solutions. What happens in a lot of these plans is that people create the solution before they create the plan, and because they think they know what the need is before, without really looking at what the need is deeply. And keep that in the back of your mind as you move through this. So yes, you're taking pulses. Again, having been through 1 million med tests the past 2 weeks, people take pulses lots of different ways, and there's lots of ways to get data to assess how someone's physical condition. I think you understand that already. But to come back to that point, it's the quality of assessors. The quality of it. I'm reading a book about Italian immigrants in the turn of the last century, and many of them came from villages in Italy where there was no doctor, and where there was a lot of superstition. And when someone became ill, there were people who would run around and say, "Oh, well, you've gotten what's called a malocchio," which is an Italian phrase for the evil eye, and that's why you're sick. Now, that's what, and they believed it. They didn't really have any scientific ways to gather any more evidence than that, so they believed it. In this case, I should say, that's about the quality of the people, their knowledge, their skill sets, their ability to analyze, all come into play here. And so this point about the quality of an assessor is critical to the quality of the assessment result. All of which says, in the end, you need to know as much as you can know in order to come up with the solutions that you seek. I've said. So the goals for this this particular presentation was for the participant to identify advantages and disadvantages of the kinds of methods you can use in needs assessing. Using the doctor thing again. So I take my pulse. I know whether my heart is racing or not racing in some cases, as yours truly were. So a pulse take is something you would start off way soon, early, and with someone with that kind of sick. You need to know what kind of questions to ask. It's a terrible statement. I hope I don't offend anybody. I just saw a TV show where they used it. They said, "Have you stopped beating your dog?" A terrible question on many levels, certainly. But it's the kind of question that doesn't give you the information you seek. In fact, it steers the respondent to giving an answer that probably just makes things worse in terms of the need for continued analysis. So those are the goals for this little slide here. And again, this is I think this is the same YouTube video that I posted up for you. And so let's look at the advantages and disadvantages. Now, this goes back to what I need you to begin to think about. There are pluses and minuses of all the strategies I'm about to show you. Usually the advantages are that you can get the key issues to kick out. You're using data, whether it's quantitative data and qualitative data, generally pretty effective. Okay, you can adjust things as you move along, and depending on the quality of the information sources, you can get some reliable information as such. On the minus side, the disadvantages, again, as I said a minute ago, talk about your skills. If you're the one, or you and some group you're going to bring together, your think tank, to assess what's going on in terms of disciplinary issues, or in terms of some kind of academic performance issues, then we're talking about how skilled are you to assess the data that you have. The disadvantage is it is time consuming, which is why people leapfrog over this and say, we already know the answer to that. That's a mistake. So slow yourself down if you're anxious to solve an issue that you think you know the answer to, even if what you think you know is the answer is the answer. Marinate in that a bit. Sometimes these things can be vague, which means you need to squeeze it that much more. And I'm wondering whether I shared this. I did not. So I'm just talking at you here. I'm not in a good way today. But there it is. I'm not going to read all of this back to you. And then there's something called cognitive biases, which is a word you hear now and then in the news about people who, well, without editorializing, you go to one cable news station, you're going to get one kind of cognitive bias. You go to another cable news station, you get a different kind of cognitive bias. People will tend to go to the cable station that supports their cognitive biases in the first place. So you kind of think about where do you get your news from? And it tells you something about your potential cognitive bias. Can be intimidating too. So again, this slide talks to the advantages and disadvantages of any needs assessment strategy. All right, and then that goes more specifically to looking for your sweet spot, where the methods that you use intersect with your shared vision. And that requires that you do, deep, not superficial, not just take the pulse and say, okay, go get your nails cut. Because that would be a wrong diagnosis for a weak pulse, now wouldn't it? What you need to think here is you're looking for the sweet spot of your ability to assess the organization and the people within the organization, so you understand exactly what you're trying to get at. And now this is you're already familiar with. Bloom's taxonomy. I'm a big believer in Bloom's taxonomy, but and there's a but at the end of my set. There's two buts at least. One is I think it's inaccurate. I also think it's in the wrong order. I think you can flip it around and start with creativity at the bottom of the triangle. That's another story. I also think that people sometimes marry themselves so much to this that they never get from the memory and maybe application up to the application premises, and they tend to not have the time to analyze, evaluate, and create. But this all goes back to the kinds of questions you need to ask. So if you were doing a focus group, for example, what questions would you ask about the issue that you're looking at? I noticed that we see some X number of disciplinary occurrences in this hallway. Can anybody speculate why it's in this hallway? Well, the hallway has a place where three sets of people cross each other. It's always a fight in that corner. Who's there to supervise? Nobody. Hello. Now we're getting warmer, aren't there? If there's nobody there to supervise, it's just inviting some kind of problem. And we go from there. So you need to know what kinds of questions to ask. Not all of them, but at least enough of them to get going. This goes back to the premise of, what do you want to know? And it goes back to competencies. Now, let's talk more specifically about, I'm going to stop that share and bring up the old share. And we're going to go back up to I'm going to add it here. Let me do the ones I have here first. All right, so one thing you may want to do is do a SWOT, strengths. I don't want to bring the video up for the sake of time, but you'll need to watch that. It's very short. Strengths. In fact, let me do that down here someplace. Am I giving you a headache going back and forth like this? Giving myself a headache, I can tell you that. This is the Japanese business technique used everywhere in one place or another. It's called a SWOT. When you look at the strengths of an issue, obviously its opposite, which would be the weaknesses. What are the threats that these issues, that these two things seem to suggest? Why can't I spell threats? And to what opportunities or goals do you see that as you've got this stripped backwards a little bit? What are the opportunities you may have to take care of the things that you're saying? So once you get an idea about the whole group's strengths, weaknesses, threats, and opportunities, you begin to take a look at how things go. So that's what that example is up top here. All right, that's what a SWOT looks like. Do you want to do a culture analysis? And you should. That's my suggestion. Now, by culture, I don't mean a range of the cultures that the children in your class represent. I don't mean that. I mean the culture of the expectations and basic beliefs of what people are about. Very important. You need to take a look at how the school is organized. I'll give you a quick example. I probably did this a couple of weeks ago. I was in a school 4 or 5 years ago, I guess it was. It's a high school, a lot of issues going on, a tremendous amount of issues, high Hispanic population, Latino population. And they were doing what they could, weren't trying to not do the right thing, but they certainly needed a lot more help to understand what was going on. So I got brought in to do a culture analysis, and I'm giving you the Reader's Digest of this. And the lady's walking me through the high school. It's a huge high school. And she brings me to a wing of the, I think it was on the left-hand side as I walked in of the school, and there's big locked doors, security guards. So it turned out, a woman the administrator said to me, "This is where the Latino kids are kept." I said, "Excuse me? Kept?" She said, "No, I didn't mean it that way. What I meant was," although that's what she meant, "this is where all of their classes take place, all of their activities, all of their lunches, gyms, recess, everything was in this big, huge wing over there." And I looked at her and I said, "Why?" She says, "Well, we think we serve that population better when we do it that way." Now, she left a few things out. I thought about it later on. I think there was certainly a lot of gang activity. Maybe they were worried about that, or the Gen Ed population picking on the Latino kid. I'm not sure. But when she said kept, to me, it said everything about the culture of the building. These kids were not part of the building. These kids were a separate part, and they're being very strong on the statement I'm going to use, they were chores. It was sort of like a cross that they had to bear in order to run their school system. That's a culture analysis, folks. And this brings it down to number 3, which talks about the issue of how the school's structured. How do these decisions get made? Is it top down? Is it flattened so people can hear each other and make decisions together? Or is it bottom up? I don't see too many bottom ups. Once in a while, you see some flattened ones, which is a preference by research in comparison to top down, because nobody really has all the answers to anything that we're talking about. It's impossible. That phrase I've used a million times with you about none of us being as smart as all of us is a dangerous phrase, because it sounds like I'm endorsing the all of us premise, and I am. However, with a proviso that says none of us is as smart as all of us unless we all know what we need to know to be smart together. And there's a difference there if you think about it. And that's about how you mean to structure the school to make decisions. So you need to know these things are going on, how these things are going on. How would you get this kind of information? Then you need to get to root causes, and root causes were described in the 5 why analysis and the fishtail YouTube. You have to go back to that. When you pull all that together, then you begin to take a look at a SWOT. I have SWOT up top. A SWOT really should come after 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, what are the strategies that we're talking about, though? What other strategies can you do? I'm going to give you a couple. One is surveys. Another one is focus groups. Another one is survey hyphen focus groups. Another one is participant observer. Another one would be a panel discussion. We'll leave it at that. Now, each of them have advantages and disadvantages. And it depends on what you're trying to find out, certainly. Again, so yeah, answer yes or no. Have you stopped beating your dog? It's a terrible question for a terrible survey. All right. But if you say, if you're interested in understanding the needs, the climate of the building, about their attitudes towards Latino children, you might want to say, on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 meaning not at all to 5 meaning absolutely, how welcome are new immigrants to the school? Probably a fair question. I could probably make it a little bit better if I thought, give it some more thought. Understand this, surveys are a quick way to get quantitative data usually. And there's a gigantic but at the end of the sentence there when I say that yes, it gives you information. Yes, it gives you perceptions, he shouted, not necessarily the real, what lies beneath issues, but you can assess perceptions. Trouble with surveys is that they're more often than not written poorly and ask the wrong kinds of questions. A good survey needs a lot of work to really, truly be effective for what it is you want it to reliably do for you. So it's not as though I would not say don't use survey, but I would say be clean and clear about what the survey is intended to find out. Don't be blurry about that. Be very clear about it. And then write item questions that are very specific to that. Here's a quick example. I did a school district I'm working with some colleagues of mine working on a career and technical education program in the high school. And the high school principal put out a survey and said, he had a whole list of occupations or the types of occupations. And he said, check off which one you'd be interested in. So the winners of the 2 winners that came out were 30.6% came out in favor of cosmetology classes. 5.6 came out with barbering, cutting hair classes. And the principal then decided, well, that tells us all we need to know. But that was totally incorrect, because if you added up all the other occupations, some of them highly technical, engineering kinds of things, they far outweighed those 2 items that the school was surveying. Got to be very careful about using survey. But again, you can use them, just be cautious about it. More effective is a qualitative approach, which would be focus groups. You get a cross sample of people, depending on, again, what your purpose is. Always know what your purpose is going to be. And you come up with 6 or 7 questions. We call them semi-structured questions, because it doesn't as though you can't ask another question or a different one. It's just a matter of you having some basic questions that you want to make sure that people respond to, and you let them talk. If the sample of the group is valid, if you're getting 10 males and you want to ask them about cosmetology, they're interested in cosmetology, you're going to get 10 males' opinion about cosmetology. I know I'm sounding stereotypical, I know that, but you can see how that's probably not a good focus group. You get a cross sample of individuals who are part of the target population you're examining. Yeah, you'll notice the next one is a combination of both. This is the one I like the most myself. And it sounds harder than it is, but then again, it's not as easy as it looks. In this, you give a survey, a good survey, he shouted. Then you take the conclusions that you've tentatively drawn from the survey. For example, if you say, well, the bulk of the students there seem to be broadly interested in career and technical education classes. Then you walk that result back to the focus group and say, here's what we did here's what we saw when we did this focus group. What do you think about it? What you've done is you've taken the survey piece and you've plugged it into the focus group piece, and now you're going to get some real stimulating conversations and interest. Best way to go with those 1, 2, ABC, but not the only way. Another way is what administrators do to you, and what you have probably may have done to others as well, is do what they call a participant observer, where you get into an activity and you play two roles. You play two roles, or someone like you. One is you observe the group. Another one is you take part in the group and you take notes of everything that went on. Not the greatest example, but the first example I can think of was observing a teacher, pretty good English teacher, pretty good teacher. And I noticed that he sat on the left side of the class, facing the class was in rows. And he was standing on the left-hand side of the class. And I noticed that his face faced into the first two rows of the left-hand side. And almost all his questions were directed to the males in that group, that side of the class. The rest of the class could have walked out the door, jumped out a window. He wouldn't have known it. He was kept looking at these two rows of kids. So when the class was over, I said to him, did you realize that you were ignoring the females, first of all, and that you were not even looking at the whole class? And he said, I had no idea. I was teaching this way forever. This is what I do. And he said, I'm a left looker. And I said, actually, I used to be one too when I was teaching. And I said, one quick solution is go stand on the right side of the class so you see everybody at least. Keep track of whom you're asking questions of, so you're not letting three people carry you across the finish line, and instead engaging the whole class to go with it. So that's a matter of just writing down everything you see and then trying to make sense out of it after the session is finished. And another one is a panel discussion. If you wanted to find out about discipline in the building, maybe you want to get some kids who get in trouble a lot. Maybe you want to get the administrators who punish them or deal with controlling the issue. Maybe you want to get some victims of the issues in there as well. And you have a conversation and you let them listen to each other. And you let them draw conclusions from it. Now, one thing you're going to see straight away is that this is not none of these are 5 minutes and done things. None of these. Even the survey, though it's quick to answer a survey, it takes a lot longer to diagnose it if it's been written well. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to take, we're looking at 1 through 7. Let's really call it 2 through 7. And you're going to consider which of these you're going to use. Now, you can say, I'm going to use them all. But look at number 7. In number 7, you can probably squeeze that a little bit more. And tell me what strategies you mean to use. Depending on the severity of the issue, depending on the complexity of the issue, depending on the amount of time you have in the first place to address the issue, solve the issue, that will enable you to pin down how you're going to needs assess. Now, this is where we play pretend for a minute by saying, you're not going to do any of this. You're just going to identify it and list it for me and share it with your colleagues. That's all you're going to do. But let's say 6 months from now, if you were actually doing this and all these things had been put into place, you're going to have a lot of information that's been crunched and twisted around and squeezed, which brings us to the next thing that you need to do. And that would be to number 8, identify the goal. Now, let me just model that for you for a second. So the purpose of this needs assessment is to explore all issues associated with academic gaps in ELL between ELL students and general education students. That's a pretty good purpose. Just a sentence, a big long thing. Now will you give me the goal that we need? All right, so we'll stop here in terms of the assignment and the discussion expectation. The assignment and discussion expectation was to get a handle on what needs assessment is about, and to get a handle on what's expected in this next chunk. So by the end of next Sunday, you're going to have your issue kind of framed out, and now you're getting down to the nitty gritty. Your fingernails are getting dirty, and now you're into the pie, or whatever you want, whatever metaphor works for you, where you have shown what you would do to get the information that you need, and then turned it into a potential goal. Once we get this squared, once we get this embedded, the rest of this will write itself after a fashion. So that's the discussion point, and that's a big piece of what this particular video is going to be about. Yeah, I'm already running out of gas, so I'm going to stop here. So, by the way, I guess by now we know that the 16th is coming and gone. I hope that you did what I asked you to do. I'm going to probably ask you to give me a summary of what you were able to do. I will do that, but I won't do that today. And then I want to, I've shown you what a SWOT looks like. And I'm going to save the content goals for another video. Trying to decide. Yeah, I'll save this I'll save these content goals potentially for tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow. I have to do it tomorrow, so I'm pretty busy the rest of the week. So I'll do this tomorrow and post something shorter up so you don't get overwhelmed with too many Bernardo things all at once. And you can see I'm trying to link things to, because this particular piece is about family engagement. Good article there, as well as the one that I posted up in the journal. Something called the high involvement model. And for next week, you don't have the Hammond book. I almost said Tomlinson. The Hammond book is more or less completed, and we're going to now get more deeply into Kozer and Fullen, and we're going to get into some things you never heard of for the balance of the semester. Okay. All right. So I'll stop here. Oh, there's one other thing I wanted to check on. I'm going to just check on that. Stay with me in 5 minutes more, 2 minutes more. Okay, all right. And I can't find it right away. I'm in Canvas right now. I think you see it. I'm pretty sure if I'm not, yeah, you do see it. I'm in Canvas right now. I'm going to assignments. And you do have, we're not going to worry about these case studies yet. That's several weeks out. And this is even more than several weeks out. You have a parent engagement plan to do. I'm just putting the acorn in the ground. What we're going to be doing tomorrow, and what you will have read about, plus Dr. Koz's Dr. Koz's book specific, more particularly, is going to speak to that. So what I'm going to do, not tomorrow, because I don't want to overwhelm you, but I do want to just remind you that one assignment is to show us how you're going to engage your group, engage your parents. So what we're doing now will not only help you in the action plan, the actual end of the year action plan, but also will help you for this particular assignment. I'm going to make that assignment shorter. I don't want to, I think I'm asking you too much of you, and I don't want to confuse you. There's a lot of moving parts to a course like this. But you're going to have to do it, but how you do it is another story. Now, if you presented in this past weekend's thing, you don't have to do the engagement plan. If you came up with something, all the more reason to shorten it. If you can show me that you have worked on the engagement piece to get people to be interested in going to the plan. I'm sorry, to this past weekend's presentations. I asked you all to do that, so I'm presuming that you did. If you didn't do it, then you have to tell me. I have to accept you on your own, and then I'm sure that I can. So I will make that piece briefer. I don't want to make it a big elaborate thing if you're ready. That's part of what we needed to have happen in the first place. Okay, so enough said of that. And with that, I'm done.